The Quiet Woman Who Shocked Everyone. Get ready for this crazy story. It's about a woman who looked totally normal but had the most incredible secret that left tough military guys speechless. How far have you ever shot a gun? Maybe 15 or 30 feet. At a paper target? Well, this woman never missed. She was just a quiet lady at the shooting range, until a Navy SEAL commander saw her tattoo and froze in shock. The young soldiers laughed at this quiet woman with her gun, but then the SEAL commander saw her tattoo and everything changed completely. Riley Shaw had been living a quiet life as a gun repair person for 4 years. She stayed away from military shooting ranges because they brought back too many bad memories. But when her friend dragged her to a shooting contest at Camp Pendleton, the young Marines who made fun of how she looked had no idea. They didn't know they were facing Ghost, the most deadly sniper in SEAL Team 6 history. Her old faded tattoo would make a tough commander freeze and whisper the words that changed everything. Jesus Christ, it's her. That morning, the California sun made long shadows across the shooting line. Riley Shaw didn't want to be there, but she followed her friend Marcus through the gates of Camp Pendleton's best shooting place. Riley was 34 years old and moved like someone who had been in the military, but her regular clothes and quiet way made her seem like just a weekend hobby shooter. "Come on, Riley," Marcus said, fixing his Marine veteran hat. "You haven't touched a gun in 4 years. It's time to get back out there." Riley's jaw got tight, but you could barely see it. For years since she left the military, for years since the mission that made her famous but also destroyed her career at the same time, for years of working as a gun repair person in a small shop in San Diego, she fixed guns for local police and tried to forget what she used to be able to do. Her days now were filled with boring work: cleaning patrol guns, fixing scopes for sheriff's helpers, teaching basic shooting to security guards. Safe, boring work, nothing like the dangerous missions that used to be her whole life. "I don't belong here anymore," she said quietly. She watched young Marines set up their stuff with the excited energy of people who had never seen real fighting. "That's bullshit," Marcus said back. "You belong here more than anyone." Riley looked around the range, noticing everything automatically. Wind speed and direction, how bright it was, places to hide. These were habits that had kept her alive through 6 tours of duty. Old habits die hard, even when you're retired. The other shooters were mostly active duty Marines, young and confident. Their gear was perfect and shiny, and they acted cocky. They looked at Riley and barely hid their laughter. Here was a small woman in jeans and a plain t-shirt carrying what looked like a regular hunting rifle in an old case. "Look what we got here," said Corporal Jake Morrison, a 22-year-old with more attitude than experience. Somebody's girlfriend decided to play soldier. His friends laughed, the kind of mean laughing that Riley had heard many times during her early days in the military. Back then, it had made her want to prove them wrong. Now it just made her tired. Riley said nothing. She just found an empty shooting spot and started unpacking her stuff with careful, precise movements. When she opened her rifle case, it showed a custom-built precision gun that made several Marines stop and stare. But it was the small tattoo you could see on her arm when she rolled up her sleeves that would soon change everything. It was a faded picture that most people would think was just decoration, but it meant something way more important than they could understand. The contest was about to start, and Riley Shaw was about to remind everyone why some legends never really go away. Riley had spent the night in a cheap motel near the base. She couldn't sleep because memories of her last mission kept playing over and over in her head. The children's faces, the impossible choice, the sound of her career ending with one decision. She came back to the range the next morning, pulled by something she couldn't name. Maybe she needed to prove to herself that she could still do this, without falling apart. "Name and unit?" asked the range officer, a tough gunnery sergeant who had seen decades of Marines come and go. "Riley Shaw, civilian," she said, handing over her ID and shooting permits. The gunny's eyebrows went up a little. "Civilian? You sure you're in the right place? This is a military precision shooting contest." "She's with me, gunny." Marcus jumped in. "Riley's got more shooting experience than half these kids put together." Corporal Morrison snorted from the shooting spot next to her. "Shooting experience? At what? A nail salon? Look at her setup. That's not even a real sniper rifle." Riley's gun was definitely different. While the Marines had standard M406 sniper rifles with all the latest fancy stuff, her rifle looked like a modified hunting gun. But anyone with real experience would have noticed the precision barrel, custom trigger, and hand-loaded bullets that showed serious skill. "What's your longest shot, sweetheart?" Morrison kept going, encouraged by his friend's laughter. 50 yards, at a paper target." Riley finally looked up. Her gray eyes met Morrison's with a steadiness that made him automatically take a step back. In those eyes, for just a moment, Morrison saw something that made his smart comments die in his throat. A depth of experience that spoke of things he couldn't imagine. "I don't keep track anymore," she said simply. Staff Sergeant Tom Chen moved closer, studying Riley's rifle with professional interest. Something about the way she carried herself, her methodical preparation, triggered recognition he couldn't quite place. "That's some serious custom work," he said. "Who built it?" "I did," Riley replied, adjusting her scope with movements that spoke of thousands of hours of practice. You built this. Chun's respect was obvious. This is precision-grade work. Did you learn gun making? Here and there, Riley said, avoiding the question like she always did when people asked about her past. But Chun was studying her more closely now, noticing the way she handled the rifle, the unconscious tactical awareness in how she positioned herself, the small details that mark someone with serious training. Ma'am, he said carefully. What unit did you say you were with? I didn't, Riley replied, but Chen caught a glimpse of the tattoo on her arm as she adjusted her shooting jacket. Just a partial view, but enough to make his heart beat faster. The contest began with standard precision shooting at 300 yards. Riley watched the first few shooters, noting their techniques, their breathing patterns, the small mistakes that would cost them points. When her turn came, she approached the firing line with the same quiet confidence she had carried into dangerous territory in Afghanistan, Iraq, and places that didn't officially exist on any map. Winds picking up from the southwest, Morrison called out mockingly. Better adjust for that, lady. Riley didn't respond. She simply settled into her shooting position with a smoothness that made Chen frown with recognition. Something about her stance, her grip, the way she became one with the rifle. It was familiar, though he couldn't place where he'd seen it before. The first shot rang out, and the spotter called back, X-ring center. Morrison's smirk faded slightly. Lucky shot, he told himself. The second shot, X-ring center. By the fifth, straight perfect shot, the entire firing line had gone quiet. Riley was shooting with machine-like precision that was impossible to explain. Each round found the exact center of the target. Perfect score, the spotter announced, his voice full of disbelief. Chen was studying Riley with new eyes. Pieces of a puzzle were beginning to fall into place, but he still couldn't quite believe what he was beginning to suspect. Word of Riley's perfect score had spread overnight. When she arrived at the range Thursday morning, she found a crowd of Marines waiting to see if the day before had been a fluke. Beginner's luck, Morrison muttered, though his confidence was clearly shaken. Let's see how she does when it gets real. The second stage moved to 600 yards, where wind conditions and bullet drop would challenge even experienced marksmen. Riley's perfect score at 300 yards had drawn attention from across the range, including several officers who'd come to watch this unexpected development. Riley said nothing, simply adjusted her scope and studied the wind flags downrange. Her movements were economical, precise, showing none of the nervous energy that affected the other shooters. As she settled into position, her mind drifted to another range, another time. The memory hit her like a physical blow. Kandahar, 2019, the school, the children's faces pressed against windows. The impossible choice between following orders and saving innocent lives. She forced the memory down, focusing on the present. But the weight of that decision, the cost of choosing humanity over orders, pressed against her chest like a physical. Wait, ready on the firing line? Called the range officer. Riley's breathing automatically fell into the rhythm that had been drilled into her through years of training. But this wasn't just training. This was muscle memory from missions where a missed shot meant dead teammates and failed objectives. The first shot at 600 yards was more challenging, requiring precise calculations for wind drift and bullet drop. Riley's shot rang out, and after a moment that seemed to stretch forever, the spotter's voice crackled over the radio. X-ring center. A murmur ran through the gathered Marines. At 600 yards, even experienced snipers were happy to hit the scoring rings consistently. Perfect center shots were rare. Riley's second shot, X-ring center. Third shot, X-ring center. By her fifth straight perfect hit, word had spread throughout the facility. Marines from other ranges began gathering to watch this unknown civilian who was shooting with inhuman precision. Who is she? Someone whispered. Nobody knows, came the reply. Just showed up with Marcus Chen. Commander Blake Harrison arrived at the range just as Riley was completing her string at 600 yards. The SEAL officer had been visiting Camp Pendleton for a joint training exercise when word reached him about a civilian shooter who was making Marines look like amateurs. Harrison positioned himself behind the firing line, his experienced eyes immediately recognizing the quality of Riley's shooting. But it was more than just accuracy. It was the complete absence of wasted motion, the mechanical precision that spoke of someone who'd done this under the worst possible conditions. 10 for 10 at 600 yards, the spotter announced. Perfect score. The gathered Marines erupted in amazed conversation, but Harrison was focused on something else. As Riley stood and began adjusting her equipment for the next stage, her shooting jacket shifted, revealing more of the tattoo on her arm. Harrison's blood ran cold. The tattoo was small and faded, but unmistakable to someone who knew what to look for. It showed a stylized ghost coming out of crosshairs, the unofficial symbol of SEAL Team 6's most elite sniper unit. But this wasn't just any version of the symbol. The specific design, the particular details, belonged to only one person. Jesus Christ, Harrison whispered, the words barely audible. It's her. Staff Sergeant Chen noticed the commander's reaction. Sir, do you know her? Harrison didn't answer. Immediately, he was staring at Riley with a mixture of recognition and disbelief. His mind was racing through classified briefings and legendary stories that were supposed to be myths. The woman standing before him wasn't just any former SEAL. She was Riley Ghost Shaw, the sniper whose achievements had become legend within the special operations community, the operator who'd taken out 3 high-value targets from 1,200 yards in Fallujah, the sniper who'd held off an entire Taliban company for 6 hours in Afghanistan, the reason half the Marines in this battalion had made it home from their last deployment, and she'd been discharged in disgrace for refusing to follow an order that would have killed innocent children. "Ma'am," Harrison called out, his voice carrying across the range. Riley turned, and for the first time since arriving at the range, her carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. She recognized the voice before she saw the face. "Commander Blake Harrison," one of the few people who knew her real story. "Commander," she said quietly, her voice carrying a note of resignation. The entire range had gone silent, sensing that something significant was happening, but not understanding what. Harrison approached slowly, his eyes never leaving Riley's face. "I heard there was a civilian shooter making my Marines look bad. I never imagined, ... double quotes. I'm retired," Riley said simply. From what Morrison demanded, his earlier mockery replaced by confusion and growing unease. Harrison looked at the young Marine with something approaching pity. "Son, you've been giving grief to the most lethal sniper in SEAL Team 6 history." The silence that followed was deafening. The revelation had transformed the atmosphere completely. Riley found herself surrounded by Marines who looked at her with a mixture of awe, fear, and something approaching reverence. It was exactly what she'd been trying to avoid for 4 years. "That's impossible," Morrison stammered. "She's just ... She's the operator who saved your ass in Helmand Province," Harrison said quietly. "The Overwatch sniper who kept your convoy route clear for 6 months. The reason you made it home to complain about civilian shooters." Riley's expression remained neutral, but Chen could see the pain in her eyes. These weren't just accomplishments being recounted. They were memories of missions that had cost her everything. "Why didn't you say anything?" Chen asked. Riley looked at the gathered Marines, seeing their expressions change from mockery to awe to something approaching fear. "Because this is exactly what I was trying to avoid." Harrison stepped closer, his voice low enough that only Riley could hear. "What are you doing here, Ghost? Last I heard, you disappeared completely after the discharge." "I'm trying to live quietly," Riley replied. "For years without touching a rifle, without thinking about missions or targets or..." She trailed off, the weight of her past pressing down like a physical force. "The Kandahar operation," Harrison said, understanding immediately. "The political fallout." Riley's jaw tightened. The mission that had ended her career, a perfect operation that had eliminated a terrorist cell planning attacks on American soil, but had been disavowed by politicians who couldn't stomach the methods required for success. "They hung you out too dry," Harrison continued, "even though you saved thousands of lives." "I broke the rules," Riley said simply. "I went off mission to save civilians." Command didn't appreciate the initiative. The truth was more complex and more painful. Riley had discovered that her target was using a school as a base of operations, with dozens of children as human shields. The official mission parameters had been clear: eliminate the target regardless of collateral damage. But as Riley had watched, through her scope, seeing the children's faces pressed against classroom windows, she'd made a choice that would define the rest of her life. The crosshairs were steady on the target's head. One shot and the terrorist leader who'd orchestrated attacks across 3 countries would be eliminated. The mission would be complete. But in the classroom behind him, 43 children sat at their desks, unaware that their school had become a battlefield. "Ghost, you have a clear shot," came the voice in her earpiece. "Take it now." Riley's finger rested on the trigger, but she couldn't pull it, not with those children in the line of fire. "Negative," she'd whispered. "Too much collateral damage. Ghost, you're ordered to take the shot. Repeat, you're ordered to engage the target immediately." Riley had waited. For 6 hours, she'd maintained her position, watching, waiting for the target to move away from the children. When he finally did, she'd taken the shot, clean, precise, lethal. But by then, the target had passed critical intelligence to his network. 3 other cells had been warned, operations had been compromised, and the political ramifications had been severe. "Present day, ma'am," Morrison said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know. I'm sorry." Riley looked at the young Marine with eyes that had seen too much. "You couldn't have known. That was the point." "The thing is," Morrison continued, "I'm deploying to Syria next month. My whole squad is, and if there's something you could teach us, something that might help us come home." The request hung in the air like a challenge. Riley looked around at the gathered Marines' young faces, full of confidence and inexperience, about to face dangers they couldn't imagine. "You want to learn?" she asked quietly. "Yes, ma'am," came the unanimous reply. Riley was quiet for a long moment, internal conflict playing across her features. She'd spent 4 years trying to forget, trying to build a life separate from the violence and precision that had defined her military career. But looking at these young Marines kids, really, who would soon face the same impossible choices she'd faced, She felt something stir that she thought was dead. The final stage is 1,000 yards, she said finally. Unknown distance, field conditions. If you want to see what's possible, what real precision looks like under pressure, then we finish this competition. She picked up her rifle, checking the action with movements that spoke of absolute familiarity. But understand that what you're about to witness isn't just marksmanship. It's the result of choices that cost me everything I thought I wanted. The final day of competition dawned clear and still, but Riley knew that conditions at 1,000 yards would be anything but calm. As she prepared her equipment, her hands moved with the methodical precision of someone who'd done this under fire, under pressure, under circumstances where failure meant death. Ma'am, Morrison approached hesitantly. Before you shoot, I need to say something. Riley looked up from her rifle, seeing genuine remorse in the young Marine's eyes. I was an ass, he said simply. I disrespected you without knowing who you were, but that's not an excuse. I should have shown respect regardless. My squad leader always said, you can tell a lot about a person by how they treat people they think are beneath them. Riley studied Morrison's face, seeing something she recognized: the hunger to be better, to learn from mistakes rather than repeat them. What's your squad leader's name? She asked. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. Ma'am, he was Kier in Helmand last year. Riley's expression softened. Carlos Rodriguez, tall guy, scar on his left cheek, always carried extra magazines for his saw gunner. Morrison's eyes widened. You knew him? I was his overwatch for 3 months, Riley said quietly. Carlos was a good Marine. He'd be proud to see you learning from your mistakes. The moment of connection seemed to break something loose in Riley's chest. A reminder that her service hadn't just been about missions and targets, but about the people she'd protected, the lives she'd saved. Riley settled into her shooting position at the 1,000-yard line. Her movements deliberate and economical. Target was barely visible, even through high-powered scopes. A small black circle that seemed to dance in the heat, mirage rising from the desert floor. Winds gusting from multiple directions, observed the range officer, a master sergeant who'd seen decades of precision shooting. Mirage is heavy, and we've got a significant elevation change. This is about as challenging as it gets. Riley said nothing, simply began her pre-shot routine with the methodical precision that had kept her alive through 6 deployments. She studied the wind flags, noted the vegetation movement at various distances, and calculated the complex ballistics required for a successful shot. But this wasn't just about hitting a target. As she settled behind her rifle, memories flooded back, not just of Kandahar, but of all the missions where precision had meant the difference between success and catastrophe. Ma'am, Morrison said quietly, what are you thinking about when you shoot? Riley paused, her eyes still to the scope. The people who are counting on me to get it right. Shooting at this distance isn't about the rifle, Riley said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent range. It's about reading conditions that change every second, understanding ballistics that most people never consider, and maintaining focus under pressure that would break most minds. She adjusted her scope elevation, her movements precise and confident. But more than that, it's about accepting responsibility for every round you fire. In combat, there are no do-overs, no second chances. Commander Harrison watched with growing tension. He could see the psychological cost this was taking on Riley. The way her carefully constructed walls were crumbling as she accessed skills and memories she'd tried to bury. The shot I'm about to take, Riley continued, is similar to one I made in Afghanistan. Different target, different stakes, but the same principles apply. She settled fully into her shooting position, her breathing automatically falling into the rhythm that had been drilled into her through years of training and refined through years of combat. In Afghanistan, the target was a Taliban commander who was coordinating attacks on a refugee camp. The shot was 1,247 yards, uphill, in a crosswind that was gusting to 15 knots. The range had gone completely silent. Even the wind seemed to have stilled as Riley prepared for her shot. I had 1 round, she said, her voice taking on a distant quality as she relived the memory. Miss, and 300 civilians would die. Miss, and my team would be compromised. Miss, and everything we'd worked for would be lost. Her finger found the trigger, applying the precise pressure that had become second nature. I didn't miss. The rifle's report echoed across the range like thunder, the sound seeming to hang in the air as everyone waited for the spotter's call. At 1,000 yards, it would take nearly 2 seconds for the bullet to reach its target. An eternity for those watching. Riley remained motionless behind her rifle, her eyes still to the scope, watching the bullet's impact through the magnification. X-ring center, came the spotter's voice, filled with disbelief. The gathered Marines erupted in amazed conversation, but Riley remained motionless behind her rifle, lost in memories that the shot had triggered. Ma'am, Chen said carefully, that was incredible. Riley slowly lifted her head from the scope, and Harrison was alarmed to see tears in her eyes, the first emotion she'd shown since arriving at the range. It was necessary, she said quietly, just like it was necessary in Kandahar, when I chose to save those children instead of following orders, just like it was necessary in Fallujah when I held position for 6 hours while my team extracted wounded civilians. She stood, her movements suddenly showing the weight of everything she'd carried for so many years. You want to know what real precision shooting is? She asked the assembled Marines. It's not about hitting targets at impossible distances. It's about making the right choice when everything is on the line, even when that choice costs you everything you've worked for. Morrison stepped forward, his young face serious with newfound understanding. Ma'am, what happened in Kandahar? Why were you discharged? Riley looked at the young Marine, seeing herself at his age, eager, confident, believing that doing the right thing would always be rewarded. I was ordered to eliminate a high-value target who was operating from a school, she said, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. The mission parameters were clear. Take the shot regardless of collateral damage. The Marines listened in absolute silence, understanding that they were hearing something that had never been officially acknowledged. There were 43 children in that school, Riley continued. My orders were to take the shot anyway. The target was too important. The intelligence 2 times. What did you do? Chen asked, though he already knew the answer. I waited, Riley said. I waited 6 hours for the target to move away from the children. I took the shot when it was clean, when no innocents would be harmed. But that wasn't the mission, Harrison said quietly. No, Riley agreed. The mission was to eliminate the target immediately. By waiting, I allowed him to pass intelligence to his network, potentially compromising future operations. From a tactical standpoint, I failed. She looked around at the faces surrounding her, seeing the confusion and conflict in their expressions. But 43 children went home to their families that night, she said, and I can live with the consequences of that choice. The weight of her words settled over the range like a benediction, and for the first time in 4 years, Riley Shaw felt something approaching peace. Riley Shaw stood before a classroom of Marine snipers, her civilian clothes replaced by instructors' utilities. Asterisk 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 and my mission, and moan gin. And when I can mend in and send to sand, I'm sent to gim in and kin and speed and bun bepan and but then ban and inland and when I am at ben and I can look at sound as man was mimic